I don't know if I'll share it with the podcast guest, though. He's such a gourmet. He might not like the taste. Finished up the writing project last night, got it delivered. So this morning I hit the trails just to feel my body again for the first time in like 2 weeks. So I took it easy. It was only like a 45-minute run, but it was just nice to be back out there and hitting it again and just feeling myself and, you know, the sun on my back and connecting with my breath. So that was great. Really proud of the writing that I was able to do and get it done on time and get it turned in. So now, shifting focus right away. We got a good podcast happening today. So he's going to be here pretty soon, but I'm going to try to make a quick smoothie. So this is kale and strawberries, green protein alchemy, chlorella, courtesy of Sun Potion, our friends at Sun Potion. I'm not paid by any of these companies. I'm not sponsored by them. I don't make any money off them. These are just products that I like to use. A little acai powder, moringa, fill it with filtered water. That's it. So I think we're all set up and you should be here shortly. Usually people underestimate how long it takes to get here. So like, we're on our way, and they're like, oh, whoa. This is really far. I told them ahead of time, I was like, it's far. So. Thanks for coming all the way out here. I know it's a huge.
Exciting, we're staying the night.
Yeah, right on.
Now that we're here.
We got a 10 or a 2 peak for you.
Cool. I love it. I love it.
What's up? Hi. Hi. Cool, man. You ready to rock?
I'm ready. Didn't we start already?
We're starting, dude. Rocco DiSpirito in the house. We're doing the podcast. Thanks for making the drive up here, man.
How do you think they developed the term podcast? How is this a pod?
I don't know.
Pod of
I
what?
Feel like
peas. Pod of.
Yeah, I don't know, but it's not a great word.
Right?
I'm glad that it's finally catching on. I mean, I started this 5 years ago, and no one was
way
listening.
Ahead of everyone.
And I was like, still people are like, oh, I heard you have this podcast, but I don't even know like how to listen to it. And I'm like, do you have an iPhone?
Yeah,
they're like,
exactly.
Yeah. And I'm like, see that purple thing? It comes with the phone.
Yeah.
They're like, oh, I've never touched that. You know, so there's still, a little bit of a barrier, I think, but it's changed a lot. It's changed a lot. But I think
most of the barriers are gone.
Yeah.
And people look forward to them now, and they have their favorites. And
yeah, and it's cool. Like now it's become like blogging. Everyone's got a podcast,
know.
So I was I wasn't like an early adopter, but I definitely started mine before. It wasn't cool to have a podcast when I started mine. But it's been amazing. It gives me an opportunity to like get in touch with people like you and convince you to come to my house, and then I get to hold you hostage for a couple
Calabasas.
hours.
I'm like, done.
Have you ever been out to this area before?
Yeah,
cool.
Beautiful out here.
So welcome to LA.
Thank you so much.
Congrats on the new book.
Thanks, man. Thanks.
Yeah, it's great. So you came across my radar because people were saying, oh, Rocco's got this new book, and he's got all he's exploring plant-based, and he's got all these plant-based recipes. And I was like, wow, that's a development. Like I knew your general, story, your kind of evolution from, a more traditional way of cooking and cuisine, and then, sort of gaining weight and getting unhealthy. And then I knew that you had become a triathlete and lost all this kind of weight and had become this kind of spokesperson or advocate for healthier living. But I didn't realize like that path had kind of continued and has now led you to dip your toe into the plant-based world, which is pretty cool.
Yes, it's exactly what happened. As my personal diet evolves, I'm realizing that, we have to move to a gluten-free diet, dairy-free diet, organic, all these things that I dared not bring up in the beginning of this journey, because in the beginning, when I said healthy and cookbook, everyone thought it was insane. Right. My publishers were like, you're the flavor guy. You can't do healthy, but that's hospital food.
Right. It's like telling an actor, like,
friends,
you do comedies, you can't do drama.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
But we're all constantly evolving. And, I think, I was reading the introductory sections in the new book, like you're very frank about that. You're like, look, this is how I started. These are the books that I wrote, and they did very well. This is how I learned how to cook, and that's what I was sharing. And now I've changed, and I look back on some of those recipes, and I don't eat that way.
Exactly.
And I'm sure they're amazing. Yeah. Of course they are. James Beard award-winning book Flavor. I mean, it's like, how many books have you written? 13 books.
This is 13 now. Yeah,
I do that, but I appreciated your acknowledgement of that evolutionary path, and it's brought you to here and us talking.
For sure, yeah. I mean, you have to keep changing, have to be dynamic, have to react to what's going on around you. As you fine-tune your personal health regimen, you're going to learn that things will change all the time. As you get older, things will change. Right. You'll tolerate less and less garbage, and the cleaner you want to eat, the more you seem to have to get rid of. But I don't like to talk about this in terms of deprivation, getting rid of things, because if you choose healthy, it seems like there's a whole world of indulgence that's available to you. Mm-hmm. When you get rid of all the packaged garbage and all the, gluten-containing foods that are your typically packaged foods, you're all of a sudden open up to this world of fresh food.
Yeah.
And that's a big world of options. It's how my grandma ate, and it's the life she provided for us. She grew fruits and vegetables in her garden. She had, her own chickens and rabbits, and made her own wine, made her own bread, preserved her own tomatoes. And I lived that way for a long time. But because of ethnic self-loathing, I rejected that 100%. I went to France to learn how to cook like French people and lived there for 2 years. And then I realized in my myth, I was like, this is the best thing that ever happened to me growing up with all these wonderful Italian, this lifestyle that is traditional contadina style living, farmer living.
I think that's right. Like, we tend to think of it as being new, but it's really kind of like tracing us back to the old. Like, a lot of plant-based eating is it's peasant food, at its core. For sure. And I like the idea of approaching it, having a perspective of what you're bringing into your life, what you're inviting into your life, and treating that like a new adventure, as opposed to focusing on, okay, these are the things we're cutting out, because that's what we do as humans. We look at it from a deprivation point. What if I don't eat this, then how am I going to live, or how am I going to enjoy my food? And, for somebody who is so extraordinarily skilled in the kitchen, to develop an appreciation for what can be done in that world, I think is very cool. Because I think the plant-based world is full of people who kind of enter it from, a strictly kind of medical health perspective, or an advocacy perspective. Mm-hmm. But it's not very many trained chefs that are willing to. There's a few. We have the Matthew Kennys and those guys.
Yeah, he's a pioneer, and I mentioned him in the book. I call him out by name. Yeah,
I noticed that. He's been on the podcast. He's friends.
Oh, good, great. He's done an amazing job of bringing awareness to this world, and boy, was he ahead of his time.
Yeah, I know.
And the results.
The world is catching
up
to him.
He looks so good.
Yeah. I know. He's like, I'm like, every time I see him, I'm like, I can't believe how vital and young. And I mean, he's been eating essentially raw forever. And he's
for
like
at least 15
preserved
years.
in a vacuum. That guy, because I think he's like 53 or 54 now. Or something.
Yeah.
You're 50, right?
51. Yeah.
51.
Yeah.
I'm 50. I'm about to turn 51. So we're about the same age.
Yeah.
Cool. And we've had kind of similar, in very different ways, but kind of similar journeys through our relationship to food. So I want to track it back, but I had one final thought on that. So
I also wanted to bring up the New Yorker cartoon. Did you see the New Yorker cartoon about?
No, what was that?
Oh, it's two people talking, and one says to the other, "Hey, I want to stop a podcast today." Isn't that great?
Yeah.
You should have that plastered.
I know.
Posted here.
There's so many podcasts now. Ugh, don't even get me started. That's a whole other podcast that we should stop doing right now.
Trashing podcasters.
But you had a question?
No,
I was going to tell you this quick story, which is, do you know Seamus Mullen?
Yes, of
Chef?
course. Yeah.
Okay, so Seamus is a friend.
Yeah.
He's been on the podcast too. And when I was in New York, maybe a year ago, he's like, come down to Tertulia. I'll cook you a plant-based meal. I was like, great. So I went down there, and he made this incredible multi-course, delight of a dinner for a friend of mine and I. And I was amazed, and I was like, this is better than almost anything I've ever had at any vegan restaurant or any other kind of like plant-based meal I've ever had. Like, how did you do this? And he said something very interesting, was that he's like, listen, it kind of relates back to the point I just made a minute ago, which is that people who open vegan restaurants or get involved in this movement, they are,
coming from an advocacy point of view, exactly. Not from a trained chef.
They weren't. They're not trained in the way that guys like you and Seamus are. So he's approaching food and flavor and texture from a very specific culinary point of view, and so he's able to do things that most people can't, other than people like yourself. And I was like, we need more people like that to be entering this world, because that's really going to change people's perspectives on what this can be, like the potential in here.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I call the book Healthy and Delicious. And I think it's a chef's perspective that uniquely prepares us to create foods that are healthy and delicious, because for a long time, healthy meant not delicious. And for a long time, delicious meant not healthy. And
these are mutually exclusive.
Right. And my very first book, my tagline is no longer mutually exclusive. And I finally just said, let me call the book Healthy and Delicious, because that's really what I'm trying to convey here. Common sense, healthy and delicious, right? There's no reason to give one up for the other, especially if you let a chef like me use my 30 years of experience and culinary bag of tricks to figure out how to do that for you. And that's what I do every day. I'm sort of in a lab every day figuring out how to hack foods, or not even hack foods, just cook them from the base up to be delicious and healthy. And it's like when I worked kosher catering for a long time. So I got through college doing kosher catering. Some people dance. We're going to track it back in a minute. But, I did kosher catering.
Well, you did a little dancing too.
Just never got paid for it, unfortunately. Didn't have the right G-string. You know, the one that holds the dollar bills really well? I didn't have that.
You didn't have that?
Well, next working on it. So when I did kosher catering, me and two chef friends who started Terra Chips were working for this caterer. Mm-hmm. And he would ask us to innovate because he was really interested in pushing the envelope and moving kosher catering forward. And this is mid-'80s, right? And we all had worked for Jean-Georges at Lafayette.
Right.
And we're like, it's easy. We just don't use dairy. There's all this other stuff left when you cut out dairy. There's thousands of choices. Mm-hmm. But you can't see that if you're not trained to use every ingredient on the planet and know what to do with them and how to cook them and how to prepare them. So we were able to move this caterer from, the 50s to current, trending 1986 food, which at that time was fried vegetable chips and basil oil and that kind of thing, stuff that Jean-Georges was innovating. And he was amazed, and that was like my first lesson. And the parameters don't matter, right? If you have the basic skill set, parameters are nothing. I just did a competition where all we had were parameters. It's called Guy's Grocery Game. So the game is do everything I can to make it impossible for you to cook this food. But no matter what he does, figure out how to do it.
Yeah. Right. Well, I would imagine your training and your experience teaches you what all the rules are.
And how to break them.
And then
and all
you
the
learn
workarounds.
how to break them.
Yeah,
but you know what rule you're breaking, when you're breaking it, and why you're breaking it in that way, right?
And what you hope to get as a result. And deliciousness is obviously a number one priority for me, even though even though I started writing healthy books, flavor was still the number one goal, right? Flavor, and then a smattering of health.
It doesn't matter. No one's going to eat it. So that's the thing. So what is what is your daily routine in the kitchen? Like, how you said, like, I'm in my lab and I'm doing, like, what does that look like?
So I have a kitchen in New York City, and I have
a commercial kitchen outside of where you live.
Commercial kitchen. Yeah. Yep, exactly. And I have a food delivery service. It's called the Pound a Day Diet. It's born from my book, The Pound a Day Diet. And when I wrote that book, it was the first book that was a real diet book, very strong diet promise. And it promised on the cover 5 pounds, 5 days, right? That's a huge promise to make. So, of course, publishers want you to prove that you can accomplish that with your diet. So they asked me to do a clinical trial. I did it with 12 people. I put them on the diet. I sent them the food. I made the food that was in the book. I created the calorie restriction and everything that needed to happen for them to lose a pound a day. And at the end of the week, it, of course, worked with everybody, right? Mm-hmm. Well, I say, of course, now because that was 6 years ago. I didn't know it was going to work when I wrote the book, but I ended up proving that you could create a calorie deficit of 3,500 per day and you'd lose weight. And then those people said, we don't want to stop. We know that it's over, but we love this. This is amazing. It's life changing. And I still have some of those clients. So every day I'm innovating new products, new foods for my clients, and delivering 6 to 8 meals a day that help them achieve their health goals.
Right.
For some people, it's losing weight. For some people, it's reversing diabetes, reversing heart disease, metabolic syndrome, all kinds of things.
That's cool.
So I'm always in the lab working on these dishes. And everyone gets a custom plan because if you don't like the food, you're not going to eat it. So even though I'm cutting calories and carb correcting and removing sugars and, making empty calorie carb dishes, protein heavy, so that people can lose weight, they have to be delicious, right? So I'm basically in an R&D environment every day.
It's unique. I don't know that there's anybody else with your skill set who's approaching food from a health perspective in the way that you are.
We're frightened to death to do it. We're all being made fun of.
Well,
we're finally being embraced by the community and the community of chefs. And Seamus is an important person in
he's
that,
got a very powerful message that's consistent with your own.
Yeah, for sure. And he's doing it in restaurants, and there's acceptance, and it gives me actually a lot of hope because I've been looking for the next opportunity to maybe get back in the restaurant business, and I keep telling people who come to me and ask, "What are you going to do?" I'm like, if I do what I did in the '90s, it's been done. What I'm really passionate about is healthy, and no one's ready for it. But I think people are finally ready for it.
I think people are getting ready for it.
Yeah.
I think people are getting ready for it, and just walking around New York City and seeing the proliferation of, plant-based, focused restaurants, it's kind of amazing. Like, I just love going there. And every time I go, there's new places all over the place and, new organic, fresh pressed juice. I mean, it's just like everywhere there, right? All within walking distance. So, maybe it's not as penetrated into, certain areas of America as it could be. There's still tons of work to be done. And we're going to get into kind of what that work looks like and some of the things that you're doing in that space. But in terms of New York City, come on, dude, it's time, right?
It's definitely,
you got to step back into this, I think. So I'm excited to see you, it's timing. I know it's the right people and partners and all that kind of stuff, but I think the world would be excited if you could figure that out.
Well, I'd like to think I can agree with you on that. I think the issue for me is how to make it commercial and broad enough so that a lot of people can participate. For some reason, that's always the expectation of me from others.
Yeah,
I'm very happy doing something super small and making it available to a very tiny population, but that's not interesting to other people. Investors and big restaurant chains. Obviously they want stuff that they can scale.
Well, it's a conundrum for you because as somebody who, look, you're a legitimate celebrity. You have a very high profile, and that gives you the power to communicate with a massive number of people. And if you're in the kitchen, you're focusing on serving just a select small number of people. I think that aspect of what you do and who you are is important, but trying to figure out how you balance those two ways of kind of, serving people with your talents is a tricky equation to solve.
It seems that way. It seems like it's been tricky. Yeah. I'm very happy doing my private client business and, definitely changing lives there. I've had people lose 100 pounds, get off loads of medicine that are 72 years old that no longer need their diabetes medicine. One client, his blood pressure dropped so fast that his doctor couldn't titrate his medicine quick enough to keep up with it, and so he ended up passing out, and he'd go out and pass out.
That happens with people.
He was over-medicated. He thought it was the food. He thought, you're not feeding me enough food. You're not giving me it. I was like, no, you're getting 100 grams of protein. You're getting this amount of healthy fats, this amount of... I know the macronutrition down. I have every client's macronutrition memorized down to phytonutrients sometimes. And I'm like, no, you should check with your doctor. You probably don't need to take that medicine anymore. And lo and behold, he checked with the doctor, and his guy's like, you don't need this anymore. And, I'm getting goosebumps thinking about that. It was 90 days after he started.
That's crazy. I hear so many stories like that, and people go to their doctor, and their doctor's like, what are you doing? Like, I've never seen this before.
Right, exactly.
How is this happening? Like, this is a miracle, and they can't even believe that this is actually occurring.
Poor doctors. Unless you're working with an integrated...
There's a lot of good doctors out there, but there's a big curve there, I think, that needs to be that needs to be addressed.
Obviously, I'm a big fan of doctors. I've been relying on them to take care of my parents my whole life and myself. But the ones that are starting to become integrative medicine doctors and use, functional nutrition and food are the ones who I think are laying the path for the future. They're laying the path for the future.
Yeah, and they're creating those protocols that you're working on. So when you work, you're actually working with people like on a one-on-one basis.
Yes, it's more than one-on-one. It's 24. It's very close. So I end up being their health coach by design. This is a 360-degree, fully integrated program. You get a customized menu plan. I have you wear Fitbits and use a smart scale, so I'm remotely monitoring how many calories you're burning, how many steps, what your
Just
BMR
sitting in bed
is.
at night, going online, like, what's he doing right now? I know exactly.
It's not that bad. It's not that bad. And some people are afraid. They don't know how much information their scales would give me. So, but if you use like a Withings scale, it'll give me their BMR, body fat percent, which is of course the most important metric for me. The body fat percent, because the total weight is meaningless without knowing the body fat percent. So I have small data from wearables and smart scales that allow me to be predictive and prescriptive with their menus. So if they did a lot of cardio today, I know they need more carbs tomorrow. Typically, I'm on a lower carb keto kind of plan for most people, because most people have eaten way too many carbs in their lives. And so that's one part of it. And then I'm available 24/7 for my clients to coach them and talk them out of buying a pound of Skittles at CVS at 2 a.m.
That's cool,
Which
man.
that's a true story.
Yeah. So therapist, chef.
Yeah, they call me their rabbi, their priest and rabbi.
Usually like somebody who would be doing that, there's like, okay, the doctor handles this, and then we outsource the food to this person or whatever. But like to take all of it, just shoulder all of that for people, that's a lot.
It's, it's a lot or not a lot. I'm not sure. I am the most fulfilled I've ever been in my life. I feel like I spent all all those years of my life, most of my life, learning how to cook to do this now. I feel like that was the preamble to this phase of my life, because without those cooking skills, I could not do this, as we discussed already. Without having the deep background in the culinary world that I have, I couldn't make these foods so that they were, 78% or 80% less calorically dense, and, no sugar, and it would be impossible to figure those things out. Yeah.
Right. Well, that's an interesting arc, because I would imagine when you're immersed in the world of, celebrity chefdom, that's a very
fine dining and
ego-inflating, kind of, in certain respects, like, self-involved kind of universe, right? And then to be kind of in this more service role, like, I don't know, like, I want to get into what that's like, but, then to be kind of in service to these people who really, not only need, what it is that you're providing them, but whose lives are being so profoundly affected by that, is like, there's nothing better than that.
I'm so grateful for it. And, it all happened by accident. I didn't, create a deck one night and say, hey, I got a great idea for a business. Let me go fund it and let me go do, it just happened organically. And the Pound a Day Diet book was the beginning of that. And it's still going 6 years later. I still have many of the same clients, and they tell their friends, and it's all worked out really well, word of mouth. What I would love to do more than anything is to be able to get this wisdom and know-how and program and food to the masses, because it would solve so many of our problems. I'm sure you've talked, extensively about how eating a plant-based diet would solve the health care crisis that we have in the United States. Would solve the Middle East peace issues that we have, the dependence on foreign oil. I mean, it's literally the solution to almost every problem we talk about on CNN every day.
Checks every box. It really does. And yes, I do.
Environment, climate change. That. I mean, you just keep going down the list. I don't think people realize the tentacles and how far-reaching they are. That the Western diet is destroying the world and our lives and creating all these problems that we don't need to have.
Right. And we're exporting it all over the world. I've traveled all over the place. I've been in Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, like crazy places. I've given talks, and I meet with these people, parents whose kids are obese, and they're experiencing these kinds of health issues, diabetes, obesity, heart disease, for the first time in the history of mankind, because you drive down the street, like, it's too hot. They're at malls all day, and there's just fast food outlets.
And now they have
playing
KFC
video games
and McDonald's.
And that's what they're eating. And they're like, why is everyone all of a sudden fat? And they're like, and they they don't know how to deal with it
Right.
in the way that we're learning how to deal with it now.
Yeah.
And so this is a global issue on the health front, and of course on the environmental front and economic front.
Literally on every front, right? This is the source of so many problems. If cheap processed food wasn't in such high demand, we wouldn't have the Monsanto issue. We wouldn't have the pesticide issue. I mean, it boggles the mind, right?
Right.
And you and I are thinking, we live like this. This is the solution. If everyone would just do this, it would be so simple, right?
But you've taken the red pill in the Matrix, right?
Yeah.
Is it the blue pill or the red pill?
I don't know.
I
The right
can't
one.
remember.
The right pill.
Whatever
pill it is.
You took it, and then, but if you haven't taken it, it's difficult,
to convince.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Because everybody's got to kind of arrive on that on their own.
Yeah, and your example can only serve so much, right?
Yeah.
The example is very strong, though. We shouldn't underestimate the power of the example.
Yeah, but I think it begs the question of how you communicate with the world, right? And the way in which, like, how do you deliver this message in a way that it can be received and is palatable? And, just in reading the forward materials in your new book, it's like it's very clear you're speaking to mainstream America, the average person. Like, look, here's the story. I'm not telling you this. I'm not telling you that. Here's a couple things that I've learned. Maybe, broaden your perspective a little bit. Like, take a baby step here. And there's a trust. Like, if you do this, like, you'll see results, and then you're going to want to take that extra step. But you're not pushing people. You're not judging anyone. So I think it's really important to be conscious and aware and mindful about the words that we choose and the manner in which we try to spread this healthy message, because it can come off as preachy or judgmental, or, and that's working at cross purposes with what you want to achieve, right?
Right.
So,
I mean, you want to get on your soapbox and shout as loud as you can and be evangelical, and
there are people that do that. And I think you need all those voices. You need every kind of voice. But I think because you have, this audience of people that spans, every demographic, like, there's a responsibility that comes with that. Like, okay, how am I going to, how am I choosing to communicate with these people? Like,
or a deep desire. It's not as much of a responsibility. It's like, I got the red pill. I want to give you the red pill. I figured it out. This is so cool. I can't believe that you can go from having the metabolic age of a 68-year-old man when you're 38 to an 18-year-old. And I did that in a year. I went from, being seriously ill and getting serious advisories from my doctor, Dr. Michael Hammer. I'll never forget the day. He's like, okay, after all these years of you coming in here and telling me you've got problems, and me telling you're paranoid and you're healthy and you're young, you finally have problems. You've got things to worry about. You're going to be in big trouble, right? I know your family history. There's heart disease on both sides.
38,
I'm like,
right?
I am? Really? Yeah. What? I was 40 pounds heavier. It was all fat. I was, eating the foie gras, drinking the red wine, living the life of a chef. It's a super indulgent world. But we're eating organic food from the market, right? I went to Union Square Market the entire time I ran Union Pacific. We bought the best ingredients. It's just that it turns out that those are, typically high in sugar, and the resulting dishes are typically not good for you.
But I think all across America and the world, doctors are having those kind of conversations with 38-year-old men and women, or 40, whatever.
Yeah.
And it's only the rare individual that has that light bulb moment that wakes up and really fundamentally changes their relationship with food and lifestyle.
Right.
I had that experience. You had that experience. But a lot of people are, there's a lot of people who will just say, well, this is genetic. I'll go on these statins. I'll try to do a little bit better, but they don't really alter their lifestyle that much. So, what was it with you? Like, did you just scare the shit out of you?
So I remember it so clearly. He told me I would have to take 3 medications, and he gave me the prescriptions. He also said, as a throwaway, of course you can change your diet and lifestyle and be more active and eat better, and this will all go away. I tell all my clients that, but no one ever listens. And I was like, oh, this will go. All I heard was this could go away, and I thought, all right, tell me about the medicine. So there were some statins and some blood pressure meds that cause all kinds of side effects, and he started to tell me about the side effects. And when he got to certain side effects, I was like, okay, the sudden death, the depression, the suicidal thoughts, the anal leakage, those are all fine. But there are some other ones that I just cannot accept, and I'll leave it up to your imagination to figure out which one I'm talking about. But I was like, at 38, I don't want to be faced with infinite. That's just mind-boggling, right? Yeah. And I'm like, I can change this. Let me go try to do that. I said, give me 6 months. Let me try to change this. And I've been working with a trainer, a really nice guy, and just coincidentally, right around in the same 6 month period, my chiropractor, I have scoliosis, so I've been working with a chiropractor forever, asked me to help him with a charity. He said, can you help me with this charity I'm doing? It's called the Grandest Cup. I'm like, sure, yeah, no problem. I'm thinking 500 portions of, tuna at some, catering event where, a grazing event where they invite 1,000 people. So a few months later, he's like, are you ready for the triathlon? I'm like, what's that? What's a triathlon?
He stuck that in?
Yeah, he's like, yeah, you signed up for that. Remember the Grandest Cup? It's a triathlon. It's a sprint. I was like, well, tell me about that. What is that? He's like, well, you gotta swim, bike, run. I'm like, okay. And my trainer, who's never done a triathlon, was a really big, muscly guy, not triathlon
right,
specific.
Not like a lean, like a runner type dude.
Not like you. We were like, okay, let's do this, right? So we started training, and we both did it. We fast forward a few months later, we finished last and next to last. Yeah, I won't tell you who was last and who was next to last, but and we got, the Athena group swam by me in the water like I was standing still. This women over 60, right? And their pink caps. And I was one of the first waves to go. So in Tri-Speak, we're talking about waves. I'm sure your listeners know about all this.
In the Hudson, or where
no,
was
it's in Todd's Pond in Greenwich, Connecticut. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I did New York as well.
New York, right.
One swim in that Hudson River is enough. It's enough. Have you done that?
Get your immunization shots.
I did. I got hepatitis immunization. I got.
Yeah, you have to get a whole battery of shots. I haven't, but I've had friends that have done.
Well, don't
the Manhattan Marathon Island, so they go all the way around, like 28 miles all the way around.
Okay,
the thing.
Sure.
And I remember this is when I was living in New York, like early, like 89, 90. My roommate who swam with me in college, he wanted to do it. And they give you this handbook, and it has all the dangers of what it's like.
Right,
it's like when you're up in the Harlem River and you have to get like 20 shots and all this kind of stuff. And apparently there was some, like by the George Washington Bridge, there's some giant suck hole. Like
yes,
that's right. That's right. Of, and like all this insanity.
It's a riptide that
and then he got
from...
like a infection. He got some like urinary infection afterwards, and he refused to believe that was because he spent 12 hours like swimming in that water. So
yeah, only one infection. He was very lucky. Anyway, so luckily for us on the New York City Tri, it's only 800 meters and it's downstream and it's very fast, and you're out of the water in 18 minutes. It was the first time I had mouthwash in my transition kit. Yeah, and I used the whole bottle. Yeah, and I couldn't get that taste out of my mouth. Anyway. Triathlon war stories. So I did my first triathlon, and it was the best day of my life. I crossed the finish line. It took me 3 hours to do a sprint, which is insane, obviously, as you know. And but it was a happy day. I never had felt more accomplished. And I had to walk most of the 3 miles, but we finished.
You got it done, man.
I got it done, right? You're only in competition against yourself in a triathlon, even though it's a team sport. And then, of course, I fell in love with the gear. The gear is so compelling, right? I mean, the gear is so much fun.
You can go down the rabbit hole with that forever.
Oh, I'm still in that rabbit hole.
Right.
Yeah, I still think about bikes
and
how many grams I can eliminate off my kit today. And then someone mentioned St. Croix, Ironman St. Croix 70.2. The steepest hill in all of triathlon, it's 21%.
Right.
The beast. I'm like, I have to do that. That is for me.
Beautiful course too.
Gorgeous. Yeah. Great course. The hill is so punishing, that half the people just get off their bike and walk up. And you can barely walk up the hill because it's, switchbacks and
sliding and
So I started training for that. And then at the same time, it seemed just like all the forces of my life were pushing me down this path. At the same time, my friend Ben Silverman, who doesn't live far from here, actually.
Right, the TV guy.
Producing The Biggest Loser, said, hey, we'd like you to come on and teach our contestants how to make healthy food. And I was like, great. Okay. Well, I'll do that. And I did a few seasons of that. And so between my chiropractor and the triathlon and my doctor and Ben and everyone was pushing me down this path. And I just sold my restaurant, and, I really enjoyed being able to take care of myself again and having the time to do that, because it does require a certain amount of time, right? Especially when you're transforming from a fat frat boy to a dude who can do a triathlon, right?
Yeah, and if you're in the kitchen at the restaurant that you own, you ain't
till 2 a.m.
You're not doing any triathlons, probably, right?
No,
Seamus makes it work. He gets out and rides almost every day.
It's a different world right now. It really is a different world.
How does he do that?
He makes it a priority, and he's really talented. He's super talented, and he's able to energize and motivate people. And he's telling his story really well, and people are believing it, and the times are different. In 2005, the story was, fell on deaf ears. When I would tell people the story, their eyes would roll back in their head, and they'd be like, okay, when are you going to get back into the restaurant business? Who cares about this healthy stuff? And
yeah.
I could barely sell my first healthy book. No one wanted it. It took 2 years to sell. I said, this is what I learned training for triathlons, that you can transform all these lovely dishes into healthier versions of their former selves, and they'll still be delicious. In many cases, more delicious.
Right.
Like lobster bisque was my first one.
Seems like such an easy sell to me, because there's plenty of people writing books about, healthy diet cookbooks, but there aren't too many people that have the skills.
But they were doctors and they were trainers.
Exactly. And they find some chef to like supplement their book with recipes, but that's very different from
right?
the world that you're coming from.
Yeah. If that. Now, usually it's some awesome hippie who's growing their own food somewhere. Right. And I say hippie as a term of endearment. I mean, I gotcha. They got that in the 60s. They understood how life should be lived. Communes growing their own food, organic, right? Remember that?
Yeah.
We were very young, obviously, at the time, but my sister, who's 11 years older than me, was a hippie by every definition. And if we just continue to live like that, we'd probably all be in better shape. But I think the world is more ready for a guy like Seamus and a guy like me. And he's, luckily he has a restaurant where he can offer indulgent food. He still use dairy and gluten, but also offer all these other foods that a lot of people are interested in. So when someone like you comes, it's not like, which bad choice do I make tonight? Which is the least of the bad choices?
Right. So let's track it back, man.
Yeah.
Let's take it back to Queens.
Queens, sure.
Yeah.
Growing up in the 60s and 70s in Jamaica, Queens, the cultural center of America.
Yeah.
Kidding.
It is.
Well, in some way it was, because
it's incredibly diverse.
Yeah, so Queens is one of the most diverse parts of the United States. There's thousands of nationalities. There's millions of people. I did grow up where hip-hop was born, so I'm pretty proud of that. Run DMC's from there, 50 Cent's from there, lots of Russell Simmons, lots of important figures in hip-hop.
Yeah, have Russell on the podcast.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, cool. And he's all about living green and healthy and yoga.
Yeah. So what was that like growing up there?
It was such a delight. I was the Catholic school kid who had the maroon blazer and the tie that said Presentation of the Holy Virgin or something on it. And I had to walk through a very dangerous park that was next to a methadone clinic. So either you're with meth heads or heroin addicts, or, it was like, pick your danger. Which one do you want? Who do you want to beat you up today? The druggies, the gangs. It was wild, man. It was wild. I still can't believe I grew up there.
Yeah, it was
the center of the crack epidemic. It was wild. But what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, right? And I had this wonderful family, and my mom would make this amazing food every day at home. And so, I'd be out in this world where we could eat Jamaican beef patties and taste great Chinese food and Japanese food and other foods from the Caribbean. So in terms of my palate, my worldview was very expanded by the time I was 14, just from eating stuff in the neighborhood.
And you learned how to cook from your mom.
Yeah, of course. She's no question the person who helped me recognize that cooking was an important skill, and watching her be this wonderful human being and have this great social life, and always using food to help facilitate it. She used food in quite literally to facilitate her social life on buses. She would take out food from her purse and give it to strangers.
Wow.
It was usually chunks of Parmigiano Reggiano and homemade bread, and they were like, they thought she was crazy, but then they would taste it and be like,
only
whoa!
A New York thing,
Yeah. On the bus, perfect strangers. My mom was like, hi, honey, how are you, hungry?
Right, that's amazing.
They would look at her like, Mom, is it okay to talk to this crazy lady? And, she was a sweet old Italian woman, so she didn't look threatening, and she'd give them like a hunk of Parmigiano Reggiano out of her bag. Not joking. And so she made friends. I watched her make friends her whole life. And so what she taught me was the most important lesson of the hospitality industry, right? Is that it's the space between people, the magic that occurs in that space. That's what we do for a living in the hospitality business, in the restaurant business. We attempt to make people happy and enrich their day and provide them with some loving gesture that makes them feel special, right?
Creates connection between people.
We don't cook. that's secondary, tertiary to what the real job of a person in the hospitality industry is, which is to make people feel loved and happy and cared for. And, old school Italian mom from Italy who came here when she was 30, she was raised on that, and that was just natural to her. So that was the most important lesson that I learned from her. And I to the day she died, I learned it from her. And she, retaught it and retaught it with her actions. And you have to, it's very important to have that, because if you don't have that, a passion for that, you can't do the difficult stuff, which is the cooking and the learning and the slaving away at the stove.
It's the why behind the how, right? And the what.
Yeah, exactly.
So you got to have that. You got to have that why. So when did it?
It's just too hard without a bigger purpose, right? It's just too hard. There's just too many hours and too many cuts and burns and scrapes and falls and pitfalls and successes and failures and it's too hard to get the skills. We didn't have YouTube. I did, if I want to learn how to make ice cream with liquid nitrogen, I couldn't look it up on Google.
You'd go to France.
I had to go to Spain and work with Ferran Adria and beg him to let me work with him for 2 years. So Queens was interesting. We lived there until I was about 12, 13, and then we moved to Long Island, where I went to. I immediately got into cooking very seriously. My first job was in a pizzeria. My second job was in a pizzeria. My third was in a bagel nosh. So I was always in food.
Did you know, though, early on that this was going to be your path?
At 14, I did. Not at 11. Yeah. At 11, I just wanted to buy Love Gun by Kiss.
Right.
And that's why I got the job.
There's a great story with that, right? Like, what's the story with you, like, wanting to get this album from Kiss? Or
you read the story? Okay. So, assuming your listeners aren't going to be bored to tears by this, I'll tell it. Love Gun came out. I was a huge fan of Kiss. My mother thought they were literally devils, right? So, think, 50-year-old Italian woman, 1977.
Yeah, I remember that. I mean, we're the same age. I remember that time.
Right?
Yeah. It was like subversive to be like a kid and be into Kiss.
It was, yeah. And my room was covered in Kiss posters, like literally on the ceiling, on all four walls. I played Kiss albums all day long, Detroit Rock City, loud as possible. I would try the makeup. My mom thought I was losing my mind, I wanted to go to the concerts. I remember someone I saved up money for the first time they appeared in Madison Square Garden, and my ticket disappeared. To this day, I think it's my mom who took it for me to make sure I didn't go to that concert. So she said, I'm not going to give you money to buy this record from these devils. You wanted this record, you got to go to work and make the money yourself. And I thought, that's amazing. I can do that. I can go to work and make my own money. That's so cool. I don't have to beg you for money anymore. So
that's what got you into the pizzeria?
So the next day we went out looking for work. We went to Jamaica Avenue and Queens and Hillside Avenue, these big avenues that had millions of shops. And I walked in and out of every store with her. And like by the 10th store, a guy named Sal said, well, I'll hire you. No problem. You'll work here. You'll scoop Italian ice. You'll grate mozzarella, you'll open cans of tomato sauce, help you make pizza, serve fountain soda at the counter, pay you 50 cents an hour, work 60 hours a week. Right. It's like, bingo, this is great. That's $30. And at that time, having $1.50 in your pocket was a lot of money. So making $30 was huge. So I worked that first week. I made my $30. I bought Some Girls by the Stones, Love Gun, the Down in Jamaica album. Can't remember that is. Down in Jamaica, they got lots of pretty women.
Is that that's not Jimmy Buffett, is it?
No, it's close though.
Yeah.
So I bought three records. Took my mom to Coney Island, which was a big deal for us, and had a Chinese food lunch out, which was a big deal for us because we weren't really allowed to eat out. My dad thought restaurants were, he wisely thought restaurants were not a good place to go get food, especially when we had wonderful food at home. Right. So that started me working in restaurants, and the next summer I worked in another restaurant. And then at 14, I started working full-time after school. Mm-hmm.
And what, was there like a light switch that went off where you're like, this is going to be my life? Or was it just a slow acclimation to like being in this world where it just seemed like a foregone?
There was an absolute moment where I made a decision. So I was on the wrestling team. I wrestled 145 in high school, and I cooked after school. I decided I wanted to not just work weekends and not just work summers. So I was at a place called the New Hyde Park Inn, and making like close to minimum wage. Back then you can get away with not paying people minimum wage, and I was working at a proper restaurant. It wasn't just a pizzeria. They had real meal service, real banquet hall. And it was run by these old school German dudes, and they made head cheese from scratch, stuff like I was learning real cuisine. And there was a guy there who was at the CIA, the Culinary Institute of America. He happened to work there at the same time. And he was always telling me about it and, going on and bragging about being at the CIA. It was such a big deal back then to be in the CIA, the Culinary Institute of America. It was the only school of its kind, really, at the time. There weren't thousands of cooking schools back then, and this was like the Harvard of cooking schools. Impossible to get into. I had to wait a year on a waiting list to get into that school.
Yeah, but you still ended up there when you were 16, right?
I did somehow.
You had to be the youngest person there.
Definitely one of the youngest students.
But you were trying to get in
graduates.
there when you were 15.
I was, yeah. So once I decided, one day my coach in wrestling said, you have to make a choice. You can't cook and wrestle because, we work out before school, after school, and on the weekends. And that's when I was going to work. And I tried to do both for a few weeks, a few months. And I was missing wrestling practice. I was missing late for work. And it seemed like, I remember it as the same day. It was probably a few days apart, but my chef said, you have to make a choice. It's got to be cooking or wrestling. You can't do both. And my coach said, it's got to be cooking or wrestling. You can't do both. And I remember thinking, it's going to be cooking. I'm much more excited by cooking. And so I quit wrestling. And that was the day I decided to become a professional cook. I was about 14. Right. And then I started talking to the guy who was at the CIA and learning about how to enroll there and getting accepted there. And I learned that you needed, documented 1,600 hours of documented experience. You needed recommendation letters. So I started to do all that. And in 1986, I attended the CIA. Yeah, and I was 16, turning 17, and it was, incredibly life altering. The discipline and just the amount of information that was thrown at us was just, for me, like heaven.
Right.
Yeah.
And so did you have to leave high school to do that? Like how?
So I didn't have to drop out. What I did is I went to summer school so I could accelerate.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I graduated early in order to get into the CIA earlier.
Man. So
yeah.
you were committed big
I was
time.
100% committed. I should have been committed actually, because no 14-year-old should be working that hard. It's insane.
But it's almost like a crazy, like that level of commitment at that young of an age. It's almost like you're channeling some crazy past life, like this
Maybe.
is like, this is what, this is what you've been doing ever since that time. So, that's amazing
I never did anything else. Yeah. I mean, at 14, when you're enjoying getting, arthritic hands from peeling shrimp under cold water for many hours a day and burning and cutting yourself, and you want more and you're asking to work more, and like you're begging them to let you peel onions, you're committed.
Right. Yeah.
You're in.
Yeah.
And you walk into a room. On my first day, I walked in, they were making head cheese. So imagine a big wooden table with pig's heads that had just been boiled to the point where they fall apart, being picked of all their bones and hair and teeth and wild stuff, right? Put into tureens. As a vegan, you're probably your stomach's turning right now.
And also the vegan audience is their stomachs are turning.
So we've traveled a long way since then.
This is part of the world of haute cuisine. This is like what you learn when you're in this. So if you're a 14-year-old, you walk into that and you're like, cool, this is awesome. It was meant to be, right? It was meant to be. So what do you for people that don't have any familiarity with like the skill set that you learn as a result of, undertaking that kind of experience, like what is it that you learn that most people don't understand about what it means to like be a chef at that level? Like what is,
that's such a big question. There's so many answers I could give you. I mean, I think one important answer that I should offer you is an understanding of flavor. So flavor is basically science. We have flavor receptors on our palates. We have papillae that recognize certain flavors, sour, salt, sweet, bitter being the main four. Of course, umami is a fifth now. When I wrote my book, Flavor, the first book I wrote, I talked about how umami was an emerging, concept, but now it's established. So learning how to balance those four flavors in food after preparing food, creating tension and resolution in that dish so that when people eat your food, they're excited, there's tension.
Meaning
like, is this going to work? Is this going to be delicious? Is there enough sour salt? Just like sweet and sour food, how it creates tension. And then if it works well, there's a resolution, just like a beautiful piece of music or even art or anything that's crafted from your hands. You want, at least if you're going to be a chef that's going to create dishes that give people pause, there's got to be tension and resolution in food for it to be interesting. If I didn't have tension and resolution, I would have been a very good craftsman and made very good, solid food, but it wouldn't have enabled me to have a restaurant where people came to eat my food, right? Or Seamus wouldn't be able to do what he does because when you ate that dinner, you were blown away, right?
Right. Yeah,
his mastery of the senses is what enables him to do that. So ultimately, after cutting myself 1,000 times and cutting my nails off and burning myself, and we when you're learning how to use all those tools, you're hurting yourself a lot for the first few years. And so if you're willing to go through that, you end up with a set of hand skills that are incredibly important. You understand how to cut and prepare every ingredient, every piece of meat, fish, vegetable. Those are basic skills that a lot of people just skip nowadays because they saw how to make the ice cream with liquid nitrogen on Google.
Right.
But those, having a deep understanding of the craft puts you in a place where when you're challenged to make something that has no sugar and no empty calorie carbs and is high in good fat and high in protein, that typically requires sugar, you know how to do it.
Yeah, you have this
you
toolbox.
Can work. Yeah, you can work around it. Yeah.
Amazing.
So when I make pasta today, I'll get plant-based protein and I'll mix it with fiber. I know that psyllium fiber gels in contact with water, so I've already got a paste there, and I'll add some protein powder and I'll create this mixture that when I dehydrate will become a sheet of pasta.
Yeah, and you know that it's going to have the right consistency and texture and flavor palette and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, that's wild stuff.
Or if it doesn't, I'll know what to do.
Right.
I'll know that something has to happen for it to get to that point, and I'll keep working on it until I get to that point. I've got a vegan donut now that I'm very proud of. I've been working on for more than a year.
Yeah.
It's 1 gram of sugar. It's got 7 grams of protein. It's made, with 5 vegan ingredients. And I think it has the potential to change the world. I mean,
that's great because I think one thing that's interesting with the kind of explosion of interest in plant-based eating and vegan cuisine is that you have the sort of concomitant explosion of like super unhealthy vegan foods. Like they finally figured out the desserts. There's tons of like amazing ice creams and cupcakes and like that stuff's great once in a while, but taste wise, some of it is indistinguishable from the real thing. And you're like, well, this is vegan, so I'll just eat it. And it's like, actually, there's like a ton of sugar. It's like just because it's made out of plants and not animals
doesn't mean it's healthy
that it's
or
necessarily going to be healthy. Yeah. But I think, it gets people to a certain place, but I think it also is redirecting people down the wrong path.
For sure.
So the idea of coming up with a vegan donut that actually, satisfies those, the flavor desire and is
the
not
donut crazy craving. The whole planet seems to be obsessed with right now.
I know. Yeah. Figure that out. Like there's the key. Yeah. Like you're going to unlock the universe with that.
Yeah. I mean, this is a donut that has a nutritional profile that you could live on this donut. You could eat this donut all day long and you'll get enough fat, carbs, and protein in perfect balance, What donut does that?
Hurry up with that, man.
No, I've got it done. I need to get to the next step. I have to send you some, and you'll have to let me know if you like it.
Try those out.
And then I glaze it. I call them dirt donuts. I glaze it with yacon syrup, which is this great. I'm sure you're familiar with it, and probably all your listeners are. But for the 4 people that come to this podcast because I'm on it, that aren't already in your world,
explain it.
It's a tuber, like it originates from Peru, and it's a tuber that produces this syrup that looks a lot like molasses, and it's got a glycemic index of 1. Mm-hmm. One is almost the super lowest glycemic index, right? Stevia has a glycemic index of 0, and it's a non-nutritive sweetener. But yacon syrup is a nutritive sweetener. It has calories, but these are good calories. These are really good calories. So how do you get a vegan donut to look and feel like a glazed donut? You use, very popular in the raw vegan world, yacon syrup or coconut nectar. Raw, of course. Really big fan of raw products. And then I top it with goji berries and pistachios and all this wonderful stuff that's in this world. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it should hopefully end up being the healthiest donut ever created. But I love taking everyone's favorite top 10 list junk foods and just flipping them into something that's actually good for you, And I think that's what chefs like Seamus and I need to be doing, just to prove to people it's healthy and delicious. You can live on this. You should live on this. There's no reason for you to go to Krispy Kreme and have 10 of those donuts, you know?
Cool, man. So you complete your tenure at CIA, and then you go off and you're in France.
Yes, I go to France.
Amazing chefs,
almost
like
a month late,
world,
month
right?
after graduating. Yeah, work with Dominique Session for 2 years. Had to work in an American burger joint to pay my bills.
Yeah.
I also didn't have a visa. That's a whole other story. But
so I mean, when you were in Paris,
yeah.
So you're
working at
apprenticing
Cactus Charlie's. I'm talking about
the polarity of those two things.
Right?
Yeah.
Avenue Raymond Pontieu. It had Western swinging doors. That was the entrance of the restaurant. I'm in Paris. I went there to work with great French chefs. Joel Robuchon, one of my heroes at the time, who I got to meet and actually work with a little bit because my chef worked for him. Fulfilling a lifelong dream of working with the great European chefs, which is what you had to do back then in the early 80s. You had to do that because we didn't have the amount of great chefs that we do now in America.
Right.
Now you can go to any town, just about anywhere, and there's probably going to be a pretty good chef cooking really good food. But back then you had to travel and get your creds, right? Those are your creds, and going to Europe was an important cred. So I ended up working at Cactus Charlie's to make my 6,000 franc minimum wage, 6,000 francs a month. And I worked for free for Dominique Session.
And what do you learn when you work underneath, a guy like that?
You mostly shut your mouth and you do a lot of looking and observing and doing what you're told. I mean, those days, the rules were absolute. There was a king and you were a subject. And you know what? I was totally fine with that because the education that I was given as a result of being a willing participant in that ridiculous scenario was so valuable and hard to obtain otherwise, impossible to obtain otherwise. Right. Now again, of course, you can learn these things on Google and YouTube, and you don't have to go through that torture. But
I think probably something about going through that when you burn in that flame, you're coming out the other side like pretty well fortified for anything that's
you come out the other side, the unburnt, right? To use a Game of Thrones reference. Yeah, when you come out the unburnt and learn the superpowers, because part of what we do is dealing with complete chaos, and having a stomach for adversity is a really important skill and character trait. If you're in the restaurant business and you can't figure out how to jump over hurdle after hurdle after hurdle, you're done. You're dead on day one.
Well, also I would imagine, even though it is it's a kingdom and there's a king, like it's still contingent upon how developed your people skills are, right? Because if you can't run your team in a functional way, you're in trouble, right? So you can be as talented as anybody with what you put together on that plate, but if you don't know how to communicate and like work with others, it's not going to last very long, right?
So it's interesting that you say that. So that's very true today. Back then, the form of communication that was most prevalent was simply example. So you watched, you had to watch. You weren't allowed to ask questions really. You had to learn from watching and trying. And if you messed up, you'd hear about it. But if you did right, you wouldn't hear a word. And that was not being spoken to or yelled at was a great thing. Silence was perfect. Yeah, no news is good news back in those days. Now there's a lot of catering and catering to people's needs and traditional mentor-mentee relationships where you're nurturing and teaching and hand-holding people through the processes. But back then, there just wasn't enough time, and you just had to quietly observe for years.
Right.
For years. And if you could, when your time came up and the guy who did the fish station was sick and they asked you to step in, if you could do it, you're golden. If you couldn't and you weren't watching this whole time, out. Goodbye, good luck, go elsewhere, or stay in the dish room, keep peeling carrots or whatever it is you're doing. But there's something beautiful about that process, and I think you're about to speak to that. Understanding what it takes to learn these deeply important skills, and that sacrifice is a part of it, but the rewards are so worth it, because these are skills that are so deeply ingrained now. I can access them so easily, and it helps me every day. And I see people who don't have the skills, didn't do this process, struggle too. And come to people like me and Seamus and say, well, how do you do these things? And I think what's going to finally make what you do and I do mainstream is enough chefs and medical doctors getting into the business and collaborating to create medically sound, and I'm talking about real integrative medicine, not traditional Western medicine, medically sound examples of food that will reverse the problems and the disease that we develop from the Western diet. Chefs and doctors, I think, are the key.
Yeah, I think I feel like there needs to be bridges built between those two worlds. Like, they live in different universes, right? These people are not talking
less
to each
and
other,
less, by the way.
know?
Less and less. Yeah.
But I think there
I work with an integrative doctor that I use with my clients, and he's really into the food, and the Mark Hymans of the world are out there now, and
Frank Littman,
of course. Yeah, mine is Jeffrey Morrison, and they're starting to bring these worlds together, and I think that's going to be super important, because I think as a chef, if you need the credibility of someone in medicine almost to convince the person who's dabbling in healthy.
Well, it's symbiotic. The doctor needs the guy who knows how to make this stuff amazing. So these two things can mutually benefit from being more deeply embedded with each other.
Sure.
I think.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk a little bit about. I want to.
Yeah. What have you been wanting to talk about?
There's lots of stuff I want to talk about.
Yeah.
I mean.
How about the fact that I have your wife's book?
I know,
I love her book.
Super. She's here, so I want you to meet her. I saw her.
Was she in New York a few months ago doing an event? Yeah. I wanted to go to that event. I did.
Cool. She'll be delighted.
Cool.
She's super excited, and she's finishing up.
Nut Jesus.
Our first book was the Plantpower Way, but she's just delivering the Plantpower Italia. So she's doing an Italian plant-based cookbook. So. I'm sure.
Amazing. That's the next one I'm working on is a Mediterranean-based diet, because they've been doing this for a long time.
Right.
Yeah. This is a beautiful book, by the way. Wow.
Yeah, that was our first one.
Are these your children?
So,
Wow.
Some of them are hanging around here. Some of them are at school. 4? I don't know where they are. Yeah, 4 kids.
Nice job, my friend.
Our nephew lives here.
And they're all vegan?
Everybody's vegan.
Amazing.
Yeah. Plant-based.
Is that the rule? Man.
It's not really the rule. It just, that's how it evolved. Like,
did you have to, at some point, advocate for your position when they got old enough to learn that they could argue with you?
It wasn't really kind of like that. It was more like, like you, I was 50 pounds overweight, and I was stuffing my face with fast food. And Julie wasn't totally plant-based, but she was super healthy, and her relationship with food was in check. And then I made my changes, and I went totally plant-based. And then Julie kind of got on board with that over time. And then we never made an announcement. It was just, we got rid of all the junk in our house and started replacing it with healthy stuff. And Julie's an amazing cook. And
was that prior to them coming to the planet?
Our 2 older boys are 21 and 22.
Oh, so wow.
They, they had been eating, and they're my stepson. So they would go to their dad's house and eat differently. And then they would come here and we would eat plant-based, but we didn't say you can't, whatever. Julie just made amazing food. And then over time, that's just what they preferred. And then before they knew it, I guess this is how we're eating,
So you sort of indoctrination.
And we never, when they go to their friend's house, it's not like, oh, you can't eat this. Eat whatever you want. This is the way we're eating here.
Right.
And just over time, it just became, that's
clear to them. This was the better path.
Yeah, it's better, and I feel better, and I prefer it. And that's just kind of how it's happened. And every kid has had their own different version of that story. And some have taken longer or whatever and have their, different kinds of, different kind of learning curve. But that's what we do now.
So you're not having those moments where they're bugging you to take me to McDonald's.
No, never. Yeah. Our girls who are 13 and 10 have never had McDonald's. Yeah.
Great. That's great.
Never had McDonald's. Yeah. So and they've been vegan their whole lives. So,
very cool.
Yeah. And they've had, they've gone to a birthday party and had cake or pizza. It's not like that, but it's just basically this is the lifestyle that we lead, and they're totally on board.
And are they advocates now too? Do they realize they're in a position to be advocates and
I think that's
preach
slowly
the gospel of plant-based?
Starting to come along with our 13-year-old. They go to the school around the corner called Muse, and it's plant-based.
Oh,
it's
terrific.
James Cameron and Julia Cameron. Not Julia Cameron. Susie, James's wife, started it with her sister, Rebecca. And, they're ardent plant-based environmentalists or whatever. So that's plant-based lunch made at the school, amazing food.
Wow.
And so basically,
that's
it's like every kid that goes there, that's the way it is. And so, and they teach environmentalism. And so they're being, kind of, educated from that perspective.
Yeah.
And I think that naturally will instill in them as they age, like a sense of, advocacy and responsibility.
Yeah. And having, obviously you picked the school, and that was a very wise choice. So having that obviously makes it much easier. Because isn't that the big problem when kids start going to school and seeing other things?
Of course.
They come home and
school lunch is a disaster. And that's one thing I want to talk to you about, because, a lot of what you do is in this advocacy space.
Sure. I mean,
dealing with, how can we get our kids healthier? Like, how can we change the food paradigm in the schools? And how can we, address this massive problem of food deserts and unhealthy foods in, the socioeconomically challenged, communities that proliferate across the world. I mean, you're from Jamaica. There's a lot of people that I would imagine you see on a daily basis, and they're getting their food from bodegas, and that's pretty much it, right? And this is like driving.
Yeah, but bodegas still sell plantano, right?
Yeah,
and they sell yuca, and they sell lots of vegetables.
Do they?
Yeah,
a lot of them sell just crap, too. They're liquor stores, basically. Yeah. A lot of them. Yeah. I mean,
if you're calling it a bodega,
I'm not maligning a bodega. I'm just saying, like, the corner 7-Eleven.
Got it.
You know what I mean?
Like, they definitely don't sell anything fresh.
This is where, farm subsidies are keep the cost low on these snack foods and these processed foods and sodas and fast food and the like. And when you're tight on a budget and you got a bunch of kids, like, you're going to eat the cheapest thing. So you're going to be the quickest to be the most unhealthy. You're going to have the highest incidence of these chronic lifestyle illnesses. And it's a vicious cycle that is further driving the economic divide between the haves and the have-nots. And at the core of this, the very center of this, is food, right? And so I know you've done a lot of work in this space. Like, how do you think about this?
Yeah, so I definitely am spending a lot of my time advocating for better food policies in schools with several charities, Health Corps, Wellness in the Schools, Feeding America, Food Bank. Charity and charitable work has always been a part of my life. From my mom's example at the Rosary Society, my Catholic school, and fundraising that she participated in, it was always something we did. So it wasn't something I got into as an adult. I've always thought that this is a part of a human's life, right? Yeah. Doing charitable work. And about 15 years ago, I had to sort of pick, because as a chef, you're asked to do lots of charitable work, and it's an easy ask, right? You donate a dinner, you donate something, you can help people raise money very easily, very quickly, and it's fun. People get to experience a dinner cooked by a chef, or come into a restaurant or whatever. So, and we're giving by nature, right? We're chefs. We feed people. We want to give everything away. None of us want to charge. We'd give everything away if we could in a heartbeat, and many of us do. Much to the chagrin of our partners. So, right? I mean, I don't know. When you went to Seamus's place, did he give you 15 things you didn't order? Probably, right? Yeah, of course, because that's how we are.
I can't even remember whether he charged me. He might have not even.
I'm sure
pay for it.
Either comped you or comped half the bill or something.
I'm sure.
Hopefully, his partner is not listening. Yeah. But so, I had to make a choice, and my choices were to focus on food insecurity and advocacy and education regarding food. And so that's how I ended up really laser focused on Health Corps, which is Dr. Oz's foundation, where they bring healthy to high school students, and Wellness in the Schools, who's partnered with the DOE of New York City, which took them 10 years to do. And now that they've partnered up, they're in they're in front of 30,000 kids a day, I think, in New York City, and they're now in like 5 states, and they're growing very quickly. Seamus is involved with them as well. So what they do, it's very, very, seems innocent, but super sneaky. The deal they made was they would create the salad bar menu. Every New York City school has a salad bar, and you get $1 a day per student. And that sounds like nothing, right? But $1 is actually a lot if you spend it properly and you buy local seasonal food, which we can do in New York City because we do have 8 months of growing and a great farmer's market. And so in the salad, in their salad bar, they sneak in all this healthy plant-based food. And kids just like it because kids are not stupid. Yeah. Kids see a pear, and if you can get them to try it, they'll recognize that this fresh local pear tastes really good. And part of being an ambassador for Health Corps is visiting schools. I visited hundreds of schools, met with thousands of kids. I used to bring my food truck to the school, and they're receptive and they're into it, and they get this. They're frightened to death that their parents are going to die of diabetes. So these kids are like, The analog might be you and I in the 70s worried about our parents smoking. I don't know if that was an issue for you, but it was for me. Mm-hmm. And so I used to hide my dad's cigarettes and put snaps in them so they exploded when he smoked them. And we did everything we could to get him to stop smoking. And now kids are trying to get their parents to eat, less sugar. So their diabetic syndrome, the disease and the symptoms aren't affecting the family as much. Because when you have serious diabetes, type 2 diabetes, your whole family's feeling this, right? You have symptoms that are, basically causing disturbances in everyday life.
Of course. Yeah. The ripple effects of that are unbelievable. And, it's difficult to change the habits of, a 55-year-old man or woman who's been doing a certain thing in a certain way their entire life. But
not if I can get them the donut.
I know.
Not if I get them that donut.
and what you do, I'm not saying it's impossible. You and I both change, but for a lot of people, this is hard. But kids, they're dialed in, man. They're interested in sustainability. They understand organic. Sure. Like they get it. It's not a hard sell. And
even in New York City, not the West Coast, where you're hyper aware of all this, and there's a really big difference, by the way. Yeah, I'm not sure if you're aware of that, but it's even though New York City is super progressive, we're not talking about this stuff as much as you guys are, and there aren't plant-based schools to send your children to.
There is one in Queens.
Is there?
I went there and went early on in my podcast. I forget. P.S.
Oh, forget
the number.
Brilliant to know.
First vegetarian public school in the country.
That's incredible.
I think I call it vegetarian, but essentially it's plant-based. There's an organization called, I'm forgetting it right now. I'll put it in the show notes. Healthy School Lunch for Kids in New York. Healthy. I forget.
That's
There's
amazing.
a woman named Anne. Her name is escaping me right now, but they're doing amazing work trying to shift the school lunch, sort of systemically. And this school, they had hanging gardens on the athletic,
they had a vertical
on the basketball court. Yeah. Vertical gardens hanging in the classrooms and in the library.
Great.
And it was kind of integrated into the whole culture.
Cool. Wow.
But that's the outlier. You know what I mean? That's the example.
Right.
We all aspire to that, but we're dealing with bureaucracy and lobbying and, regulatory policy and all of these things that are driving these decisions. And there's a lot of money to be made. These contracts
from keeping
that get
the
signed
system the way it is,
whatever
for 10 years
provider is providing that food. There's people in the state and federal legislatures that are trying to make sure that they get that contract and that contract stays. And a lot of that is shit food. So,
but it's changing. It's changing. Our nonstop blabbering is working. Mm-hmm. This talking with people who are not interested is starting to have an effect. People are starting to see the benefits of a healthy lifestyle. Forget about just plant-based, but a healthy lifestyle. They're seeing it in the behavior of their children. They're seeing it in their co-pays of prescriptions on a monthly basis. Those costs start to add up after a while. And, when people tell me, I have a big family, I can't afford to feed them healthy, I always say, well, what does it cost you when you lose your top income earner at 50 years old? What does that cost your family over 30 years?
It's
you
tough
have to think
people,
of all the costs,
I know,
right?
It's tough to get people to motivate themselves that, you're going to pay for it now, or you're going to pay for it later because you're going to be sick. But people are like, well, I'll deal with that.
Well, they're paying for it sooner because type 2 diabetes didn't exist in the 60s. When we were kids. That was extremely rare. I think it was called early onset, right?
Onset.
And it's a disease we essentially created.
Juvenile
diabetes,
adult,
early onset,
whatever, right? Yeah.
And it's now more and more prevalent, and people are realizing that you can fix it with food. And we've got guys like Dr. Oz on TV every day advocating for this stuff, and other people like him. And I think the message is finally getting around. I think what we need to do is work on providing people with the actual food, get the
how do we make it more
delicious.
Affordable? I mean, there is, to kind of preface this, there is a sense or an idea that healthy living, wellness, wellness
is expensive
is sort of
for rich people.
Yeah, it's like an elitist thing. We're talking about spirulina and cordyceps and crazy, super expensive superfoods and all this kind of stuff. It's how can we make just simple, healthy eating, predominantly plant-based, whatever. How can we get people who really need it the most and can't afford it access to these things?
So I don't know what people are seeing that I must be missing, but when I go to the farmers market in New York City, they're taking SNAP. They're discounting.
Oh, they take SNAP?
They take
That's
SNAP
great.
at every market in New York City. They're doubling the dollar sometimes. They're doing offers where every SNAP dollar is worth $2.
And just for the listener, SNAP is essentially food stamps.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah. It's nutrition assistance programs. That's a federal program for people who can't afford to buy food for their family. So they're making it very, very compelling to use their SNAP funds at the farmer's market versus the bodega where you would typically buy a bottle of Fanta, right? With your SNAP money. So there are places and there are opportunities. You just need to hear this stuff from guys like us or learn about it at the market. But when I'm at the market, I see a lot of people from communities that we think of as the ones that are typically affected most by the notion that healthy is only for wealthy people, and they're buying smart. They're buying smartly. They're buying vegetables, and they're coming at the end of the day sometimes when the farmers are giving away the food basically because they don't want to go home with all their food. They have these $1 bags at the end of the day that are like 5-10 pounds of greens and tomatoes and whatever it is that they don't want to take home. So it's it's a change of routine. I think I don't really believe that a pound of broccoli is more expensive than a pound of Hot Pockets. Right. I just, if you do the math in terms of edible product at the end of, I mean, one thing I love about plant-based foods is that plants are much less expensive than meats, and I can make these donuts for little to nothing, using chickpea flour, right? And it's inexpensive stuff. So I need someone to make the case to me that living healthily is only for the wealthy and more expensive, because I just don't see it. Right. It doesn't make sense on the merits. It doesn't. It
exists if you're going to Whole Foods and Erewhon and like
Whole Foods the issue. Now everything's cheap at Whole Foods, so it's no longer going to be the issue.
It's changing now with Amazon.
But I think you're right. I think Whole Foods helped create this notion that that's how you live a healthy lifestyle. You have to go to Whole Foods, but it's just not the case. There are farmers markets in every city in America. And if you live in a food desert, you're probably living in a desert of every kind. So you're probably driving around a lot, to go to work or elsewhere. And you're passing opportunities, it's really mindset and learning how much damage you're doing to your children if you're not making a choice to feed them healthy foods. You're going to pay pretty soon. It's not going to be 50 years down the road. Your child is going to have
accelerating.
Yeah, exactly.
It's crazy. I think the stat that I saw that was by 2030, 30% of Americans are going to be diabetic or pre-diabetic. And I can't remember what the childhood rates are for that, but childhood
it's
obesity
1 in 5 now. It's going to be 1 in 4 by the end of the decade.
Are unbelievable. Yeah. There was did you see, I think it was just last weekend, New York Times did a documentary on the impact on ultra processed foods on Brazil, like all these.
Yes, I did.
See that?
It's
incredibly
nuts.
well
It's
done.
nuts.
Yeah, and you're just seeing like how it's just wreaking havoc on this culture.
Yeah.
Because they're
typically would have eaten local
right.
food that their mothers or someone at home would have cooked. When Mexico eclipsed America as the number one most obese country in the world, I almost cried because every time I've been to Mexico, I've eaten the most wonderful local food I've ever had in my life. I mean, they have a cuisine that is so rich and so delicious, and all based on local ingredients, hyper-local ingredients. There are parts of Mexico that don't even know about the ingredients that are in other parts of Mexico. It's the same is true in Italy. Unfortunately, Europe is changing. I talk about the Mediterranean diet a lot because it's, in my opinion, one of the best examples of a sustainable for life diet pattern that works basically and doesn't leave you feeling like you're deprived. But that's changing too. The Spain and Italy are starting to develop obesity issues. It's crazy.
It's even starting to encroach on blue zones, where the people have lived, it's like, it's a global issue and it's not a small thing.
Yeah.
We're talking about, this is the balance of the well-being of our species.
Yeah.
And we're just propelling ourselves down this path that is just decimating our health and
depleting our resources
we kind of acclimate to it as if it's just a new normal. It's like, this is just the way human beings act and look and eat now. And it's not. We need to take a step back and really look at what we're doing. And I think maybe it's uncomfortable for some people to have to look in the mirror and hold themselves accountable for their habits and their behaviors, but this is your life, man. And, I think we all need to take greater personal responsibility for the choices that we are making. And to the extent that the problem seems so daunting and unsolvable, like who am I? I'm just a dude. everybody votes with their dollar, and that dollar counts. And we live in a capitalist society. And if you start buying, almond milk and not dairy, like the economy is going to shift around that. And we're already seeing that. Like there's a lot of momentum, and I'm excited. Are you optimistic? Like, how do you look at this? Like
after this hurricane cycle and the wildfires this year and the earthquakes, I'm a little less optimistic, but it's been quite a season, but I'm definitely optimistic because I do see what I care about in food growing, not shrinking. And I do see and hear more people talking about it, more people interested in it. When I pitch these books to publishers now, they want what I used to have a hard time selling. They're looking for that now. And when I talk about a vegan donut, people are excited. It's not like eyes roll back in their head anymore and like, oh, Rocco, enough with your hospital food. My chef friends thought I lost my mind and went off to make hospital food. That's how they described what I was doing.
What do they think now?
I have to ask them, but I think based on the number of chef friends who are now in their 50s and asking me for help, I think that their opinion has changed a little bit.
What do you think about the whole culture of celebrity chefs as somebody who's, walked through that world?
So I think there are a lot of wonderful things that came out of that movement. One, chefs have been able to impact the collective American palate in positive ways. Not always positive, but many and mostly I would say positive. The fact that there are farmers markets everywhere again, the ones that disappeared in the 60s that are all back, I think is a result of chefs, looking for better local seasonal ingredients. The fact that there's a yuzu flavored Snapple, I even like to take a little credit for because I was one of the first chefs to use yuzu in the early 90s. So I think we have a voice, and people like to listen to us because we're fun. We cook food and we celebrate and we do it 24/7. And so I'm glad that we have a voice. I don't think we're celebrities in the sense of, real celebrities that go to the Emmys and do the red carpet. And but we're people that are looked to for guidance.
First of all, you are a celebrity. So there's that. But also there was kind of like, I don't know what happened in the culture, but like suddenly, whether it's reality TV or whatever it is, like, there was a thing where suddenly like these chefs who were doing amazing work, who were kind of doing it, had their followings and had notoriety in that subculture, were suddenly, sort of foisted on the public. And there was kind of a fever around that I don't know if it's still like that. Maybe it's,
I've been asked since the 90s, when is this chef thing going to end?
It's still
and
going
I keep saying,
on.
I don't think it's going to end. I think we're part of the permanent fixture. We're part of American pop culture or culture in general. And that's a good thing because we're food advocates and we're people who are charitable and we're people who like to make people happy. So that's a really good thing. In terms of the celebrity alone aspect, there isn't a chef out there who really is known for being a celebrity. They all learned how to cook at some point, most of them, and they either had restaurants. So we're working people, we're not, we're different. We're different than a YouTube star or that ilk. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. And I think it's great that we were given an opportunity in the 80s, starting with Wolfgang Puck and Emeril, and to address America as an audience because we have good things to say, important things to say. We're a positive force, Mm-hmm.
We got to wrap it up here, but let's.
So many things I want to tell you. I feel like I just had deja vu.
Well, tell me. We don't have to stop.
Yeah. So many things. Wow. The book. Yeah, I have a new book.
I know. Like,
shameless plug.
Talk about the book.
Yes, I have a new book. It's called Rocco's Healthy and Delicious.
But go into it, please.
It's over 200. The official subtitle is over 200, mostly plant-based recipes for everyday life. So, what I want to do with this book is not ply you with diet theory, not tell you about the keto diet, the Mediterranean diet, the paleo diet, the DASH diet. My readers get it. They understand. There's lots of diet theory and lots of ways to biohack and break into the system and get your body to do crazy things. But really what's sustainable over a long period of time is just cooking healthy food. And I'm talking about common sense healthy, right? We know that there's too much sugar in our diet, so I don't use any sugar or refined sugars in this book. I don't talk about it in the beginning very much, but I don't use gluten. I don't really use dairy in this book, except for I break for Parmigiano Reggiano. And I find that for most people, when you're making pasta out of like pea protein, you have to have Parmigiano Reggiano to get them to eat it. But But your wife's version of Parmesan
Yeah, I
Reggiano is
know.
going to save me.
I was going to say, you got to like check that out. You
I
might
do.
be revising that for your next book.
I do. So the book is actually 248 recipes. So it's a proper cookbook. It's the first proper cookbook in 8 books. And I believe that there is something in that book for every single person who wants to cook at home and live a healthier lifestyle. And these are super simple recipes. And every book, every recipe has a picture, which is super important. My readers keep telling me they want more recipes and more pictures. That's all they keep telling me. And so I'm delivering what you've been asking me for. And the pictures are hyper focused on the food, extreme close-ups. It's food porn at its best. Yeah.
Well, there's certainly no shortage of plant-based recipes in there too, and I'm excited to try them out.
That's 90%.
Super cool. Yeah, that you've.
There's a few meat dishes. You can't throw the baby out with the bathwater.
I know. We'll get you there. We'll see what the next.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Check in with me in a year, man. I'm going to get you.
Trust me,
100%.
I pitched it.
They're like you're a little resistant.
They're like don't lose your entire audience.
You're losing the thread completely.
Yeah.
But it's cool, man, and I appreciate the work you do, and it's been a cool journey to kind of watch from afar, and nice to meet you. I think it would be great to kind of round this out and let people go with some wisdom around trying to help people. Like, you work with these clients one-on-one, you're seeing it on the front lines, like people that are struggling with food and trying to find their way through it. If somebody who's listening and they're stuck and they're like, I hear it all, like I understand it, like I just, how do I take that first step? What do I do? Like, how do I put that first foot forward? Like, help me, throw me the lifeline.
Yeah. So the prequel is the hard part. The prequel is always the hard part. And I talk about this a lot with my clients, getting to the point where you're making a conscious decision to change your life, right? That's the struggle. Once you've made the conscious decision, it's usually fairly easy.
It has to be self-motivated. It has to be a self-driven thing.
Yeah.
It has to be an internally,
And hopefully not always motivated by something catastrophic your doctor tells you, right? Unfortunately, that's what happens most of the time. But you know what? Just give yourself 72 hours and try some of the stuff we're talking about. Just, try my recipes, try your recipes, try making yourself shakes and smoothies for 3 days out of full fiber, no juicing, blended vegetables and fruits, and give up the gluten and the dairy and the sugar, and tell me how you feel, because you'll feel a difference in about 12 hours. In 72 hours you will definitely feel a difference,
right?
And you'll get to a point where when you add that stuff back, you feel a negative difference. You start to feel really bad once your body's cleaned out and detoxed.
Yeah. So what you're doing is you're getting people to connect with how they feel physically. If you're just eating junk all the time, that you acclimate to that. That's your normal.
Right.
You lose touch with how you can feel.
Yeah.
Right. So creating that connection.
Yeah. So if you're one of those people that's always tired and cranky, and you're overweight, and your clothes don't fit, and you're super self-conscious, and you're sick of that, give it a try. You have nothing to lose. Go to negative calorie diet. Try my 3-day cleanse. It's a cleanse with food, so it's not one of those crazy juice cleanse where you eat nothing. Try, I don't know, the first 10 pages of Plantpower Way, I'm sure, has a great plan. Just try it, and then tweet me and tell me you don't feel a difference. I dare you. I dare you to tell me you don't feel a difference, because you will. One important thing is to drink a lot of water. Very important that people don't realize. We need to be, our muscle is the only part of our body that burns calories, and if it's not fully hydrated, it doesn't work. And so drinking a lot of water is super important through any of these processes as you detox. Water will keep you sane.
Yeah. Nice, man. Rocco's Healthy and Delicious.
Yeah.
Comes out October 10th. Is that
17th?
17th. Yeah. Right on.
When will this air?
What's that?
When will this air?
I'll look at the calendar. I'll try to orient it around when it comes out. Yeah, cool.
No worries, man.
Yeah, but probably around that same time.
That'd be great.
Cool,
Thanks.
man.
Yeah. Thank you. This is really wonderful.
Super,
nice to
man.
meet you.
Awesome. Good talking to you.
High five.
High five. Cool. So you can find Rocco's pretty easy to find on the internet. Rocco DiSpirito.
Ubiquitous on the internet, whether you like it or not.
All good, man. You got any triathlons coming up? Are you still?
So back surgery 2 years ago.
Oh no.
Been 3
the bike
exploded
is,
discs.
mothballs. Oh man.
Yeah. So running is definitely out of the question. I can bike still, but I have to refit my bike now. And yeah.
You live in Manhattan?
Yeah.
You do.
Yeah.
So where do you do you go up up across the bridge?
I do that a lot. I do up and down to the bridge from. I live all the way downtown, so Upper West Side. Yeah.
Cool.
Plus out in Long Island. Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Nice, dude.
But if you're eating, one thing, it's 90% food, right? You know this.
Yeah.
I think the game is 90% food. So if you're eating well, you don't have to do a triathlon to get into shape. You don't have to do any of them. It's wonderful to do, and definitely something you should try if you're into it. But you don't have to go do bar class and do all these crazy things if you're just eating well, because you'll get to 90% of your goals with a change in diet, a profound change in diet for most people.
And if you are doing all of those things and you're not paying attention to how you're eating, it's not going to work.
You're going to end up one of those people like my clients who say, I work out all the time, I can't lose weight. It's because you can't out-train a bad diet. Right. You just can't. So,
good talking to you, man.
Yeah.
Cool. Peace. Plants.